This piece was a concept that I was interested in showing, and it's based on a twin-cylinder V-twin Harley-Davidson motorcycle. And I took the measurements off from a Harley-Davidson that was sitting in my studio, and I added 10%. So this is 10% larger than a Harley-Davidson road bike. The skeleton, the measurements were taken off from a 6'4" man, and then I added 10% to those. So when you stand him up, if you stand him up, he is 7 feet tall. So that's the actual size of this. I didn't know how this would go over in the general public, so I entered it in the state fair, I think in '97. And lo and behold, it came out with the best of show. And so that made me feel pretty good, because there's a lot of work in this. I'm thinking somewhere around 400 hours plus. So it's intensive with the labor. The bones in the body are represented fairly realistically. There's ball joints in the shoulder, regular joints in the arm. Everything moves. The original title of it was The Time Machine, No Brakes. And what does that mean? This was supposed to represent our living in our part of the continuum of our life. And so we've got a beginning and we've got an end. In the meantime, we're on this road, on this trail. And the significance of it is that time does not wait. Time keeps marching. So there are no brakes represented on this piece. Motorcycles have brakes, front and back. This one doesn't. That's why Time Machine, no brakes. And to me, time cannot be slowed down. Time keeps pushing forward. And just like our lives, we keep pushing forward. We're on the highway and we do the best we can for as long as we can. But that's it. It's a part of the continuum of time that we have on this earth, and you can't stop time. So, no brakes. Time Machine, no brakes. When we put it in the state fair, we knew that people wouldn't probably get that story, so we just called it Steel and Bones. Steel being the motorcycle, bones being the skeleton. But it's supposed to represent fairly closely the human skeleton. This bench is made from our family skis. When our kids were little, my wife and I were both in the school system in Stanley. And I had done some skiing when I was in college, and I thought, if you can get kids skiing early, young, they can probably be okay. So our kids were about 6 and 4, and we took them out to Red Lodge, and we put them in the ski school for a day, and then we started taking them on the kids' slopes, and they had a blast. They had a lot of fun. And Red Lodge is a one-day long drive, so we could get out of school on a Friday, drive out there and ski Saturday and half a day or a full day Sunday, and then drive home late Sunday night. And our kids started telling other kids in the Stanley school system about all the fun they were having skiing. So the next year, a few more parents and kids came out, and it kept growing. A few years after, maybe the kids were now like 13 and 11, and they were pretty good skiers. For Flatlanders from North Dakota, they were pretty good. And my wife skied the long run at Red Lodge. It's called Lazy M. It's a fairly long, several mile run, ski run. She got to the bottom, she turned around, she started counting the kids and parents from Stanley. 90 kids and parents, and they were all having a blast. So skiing was kind of a big deal. When we ask our kids later, maybe not too many years ago, what was the best part of growing up in our family? Oh, the skiing at Red Lodge. That was the best. It's a clean, wholesome environment. And so these skis were all used by our family. Some were kids' skis, they were shorter, but to make them fit on the bench, we had to eliminate the part that didn't meet the measurements. So these are family skis. I built the frame out of tubing. I bought a special bender just for making those bends to make it nice and smooth. I had it powder coated. That cost quite a bit of money, but now it can sit outside and it'll look good for a long time. It'll stay shiny. It's pretty tough paint. So, and then lo and behold, a couple years after the skeleton, this piece got best of show in the state fair. So other people must have said, that's pretty cool. So this is a good piece to do. I'm glad I did it. This piece started off as just a picture frame that was going to be thrown away, and I wanted to do something significant with it. So as I thought about it, this concept came up, and I wanted to kind of show people represented by railroad spikes. I like the concept of a railroad spike because they're small pieces that do a big job. They do a huge job. So I have over the years made a lot of little people, but with railroad spikes. So this particular piece is called In the Picture. If you are viewing this picture now, you are in the picture yourself. You are represented by one of these three figures in the picture. And what we have is childhood, adulthood, and most of us have run uphill most of our lives in adulthood, and then we hit old age, and here's the old person walking with a cane. And this person on the left represents our ancestors. We all had ancestors, and this as to represent all of those. And then once we pass from this life, maybe we go somewhere, maybe we don't. If you're of a religious nature, you're probably going to heaven. And so this person represents the one who's out of the picture now, but he's got a wave going. He's waving at the people who are standing there waiting for him to come in. So it represents the past, the present, and the future, and hope. This cross is a smaller version of one that I did for First Lutheran Church here in Minot. We had a big project making a walking bridge from the main sanctuary over to the family center, and they were looking for something unusual out in their, what was going to be a rock garden. So I made a drawing and presented it to the church council, and they liked it. They never told me that. So for 3 months I thought, well, they must not have liked it. And one day somebody from the council said, "How are you coming on that cross?" I said, "Well, you never told me to go ahead on it." And they said, "Oh, we all thought it was great." So then I got to work on it, and that one at First Lutheran is, I think, between 400 and 500 hours of work. Now this smaller cross is for my home church in Stanley, North Dakota, American Lutheran. I grew up in that church, and once the gals that were working on the remodeling committee heard about the First Lutheran cross, they said, "Well, you've got to do something for us too." So I felt guilty enough, motivated enough to undertake it. So this has a lot of the same features as that bigger cross, just fewer of them. I think this cross probably has probably 100 small crosses. So the big cross has a couple hundred crosses. So it's called the Cross of Crosses. That's kind of the name for them. And it can be the same in Stanley as it is here in Minot. And you'll see crosses made out of flat metal, out of rebar, out of wire that was in the flood of 2011 here in Minot. And you'll see lots of symbols, starting off with the vine. The Bible talks about, "I am the vine, you are the branches." So you got the branches coming up, the leaves, the grapes, the wine and the bread, Martin Luther's symbol. And you've got some things specific to that church in Stanley on this one, such as the date it started and the date they built the new building. And you got the 10 Commandments. You've got the most common saying probably in the church, in the Christian church, "He is risen," is on the top. The one at First Lutheran has a convertible top. It says, "He is risen" on Easter morning. Before that, it's a different symbol. It's got the crown of thorns, and it's kind of brutal. I didn't want kids to have to see that, so just up there for about 3 days during that Easter, time of Easter. Then it goes back to "He is risen." This particular one also has a rock down below, and built on a rock, the church doth stand, is the old thing that was said. Blacksmithing techniques to twist this heavy rebar into this circle. And these crosses here have roots going in the ground, and yet from the ground they come up and support the cross. So it's kind of to represent that it's a living cross. Same with this figure down at the bottom there. It looks like it's in motion, and that's because it's a living cross. It's not a artifact from the past that, you know, doesn't have any relevance today. It's a living cross. So got carpenter tools on this side because that's how Jesus started out. And you've got the spear over here because the spear was involved in the crucifixion. This piece is a result of thinking about one of the greatest artists and thinkers of all time, who was Leonardo da Vinci. And he lived in the 1500s or so, around the time of the Reformation. And he got to thinking, as other artists had done before, about how to interpret the Last Supper of Christ. And so if you go back and look, you will find all kinds of people's renditions of the Last Supper. And Leonardo was commissioned by someone in Italy to put this rendition of the Last Supper in a church in Italy. And he did that, and he experimented with a new type of paint. And as it turns out, it didn't work so well. So a couple years later, this painting started to disintegrate, and nobody was very happy. And he went back and he did some fixing on it, and other people had fixed it over the years. And they say if you go there now, you can still see the painting, and it's huge. It's 30 feet wide and 15 feet tall, but it doesn't look like the original one. Now, this piece over here looks like the original. That's supposed to be a very good copy of Leonardo's interpretation of the Last Supper. And until I started studying this, I didn't realize that each disciple is represented in that picture. Some things that you'll see if you look close. Judas is there. He has his little bag of 30 pieces of silver. The guy behind him he has heard that something big is happening and somebody's going to betray Christ. So he's got a knife with him, and he pulled out a knife. And each person on there is got a name, and they've got a purpose. And so when I did this piece, once again out of railroad spikes, those 12 disciples did a big job for some 12 little people. They changed the course of the world. And so those little railroad spikes keep the train on the tracks and hold it in place, kind of metaphoric for the disciples. So people that'll study this will be able to see that these pieces look a lot like Leonardo's rendition of the Last Supper. And you've got Judas with his little bag of silver. He tipped his glass over when he heard the news that somebody had betrayed Christ, and he knew it was him. And the guy behind him has got his knife. He doesn't know who it is yet, and he isn't going to use the knife because that's not part of that story of the Last Supper. But as if you were to go and read the story of the Last Supper, you would see that every one of these people has a name and a story. My goal on this was to make a Viking axe, and so I did some research and found out that some Vikings preferred short axes and some Vikings preferred long axes. And I wanted them to look fairly realistic, so I did quite a bit of study to get the right shape and size. And then I struck up the forge and started beating some metal around, and I came up with what I think is a pretty close representation of Viking axes. And I first displayed them on an old piece of wood that I thought was kind of cute, and then I realized that, you know, not everybody could see what I thought might be possible. So I said it really should have some kind of a Viking ship as part of this. So that's how we came up with hanging the two axes on the Viking ship. And we've got the symbolism of the oars in the water that propelled the Viking ships. And so it's supposed to be a kind of a nostalgic piece for those who thought the Vikings were romantic adventurers, which of course they weren't always. Sometimes they were brutal and did things that we're not proud of today, but nevertheless there's this history of the Vikings, and me being 100% Norwegian and my wife being 100% Norwegian, we have to do some things that are part of our heritage, be they good or bad. Prairie Sky Bread is a newer business started this year in downtown Minot, and they had their own logo, and I saw that logo, and I don't know who designed it, but I said, man, I like it. It's really got some character to it. So I had some old wagon wheels out there, and I've as many times as I could have over the years, I've enjoyed helping new businesses get going. Sometimes it's just some words of encouragement, but sometimes if I can figure out a way to give them a little bump, I do. And I knew they were struggling with coming up with expensive ways to present themselves and their logo, Prairie Sky Bread. So I started looking at some wagon wheels I had, and I looked at their logo, and I said, I think I can do that. And then I think if we could backlight it, it would be really cool. So I didn't know if I could make it work or not, and I didn't even know if they'd want it. So anyway, I copied their logo, which has got some wheat on the top, and these are supposed to be the rays of the sun. And of course, it's also a loaf of bread. And then you've got the words. And when I got done and plugged it in for the first time, I said, man, I like it. I rubbed it with a brass brush. First I heated it so it's got kind of a bronzy tone to it. And then I took it over and showed it to him, and I said, don't just try to make me feel good. Is this something you're interested in? Well, what's it gonna cost? I said, the cost is nothing. I'm going to donate it to you as my gift of trying to help you get this place open and rolling. Well, they were overcome, and I got some really nice thank you cards from them. And I hear comments about it. People that have gone to the bakery sit there, and that's one of the things they will look at is this sign, Prairie Sky Bread, because it's one of a kind. This is the only one. Walter Peel is a treasure for Minot and for North Dakota. And my prediction is that in the future, he's already well known internationally, but Walter's going to be a pretty big deal. His work is just unique. And so Walter and I have been friends for quite a few years, and we're always trying to get back at each other in some way and make sure the other person feels guilty. So this is my piece to try to make Walter feel a little guilty. I don't even know if he wants it or if he would like it, but I gave him an email and I said, Walter, I made a tribute piece to you, and I think you should go into the museum. And I made some hooks on there, and I think there's a place for some of your cowboy paraphernalia. And so take a peek, and you don't, put it out behind the barn if you don't want it. I'm not that vested in it. So anyway, he came and he saw the piece, and he got so excited, and he sent me an email. Oh man, I just love it, and I'm going to bring in some of my goodies. He said, I've got a lot of stuff that I could put there. And so they tell me that the next day he showed up early, and he had brought a whole bunch of stuff, and what he wound up with was a rope and a bridle, a set of spurs, and a set of hobbles. And Walter, in his day, he was a good cowboy. He did a lot of rodeoing. So this is just a tribute for Walter Peel. You couldn't buy this. He couldn't commission somebody to do the exact same thing. It's just a gift, just to show him that I think he's a pretty great resource for this area. One unique thing that happened as we were looking at this horse, we realized that the left ear could be here, or that could be the right ear. And so he can be looking back or he can be looking ahead. Depends on how you catch the ears. And so to me, it's a moving piece. It'll move, the horse will turn his head one way and then he'll turn it the other. Just depends on how the light catches it. So that's my tribute to Walter Peel. This piece is a tribute to underground workers. And when you think about underground workers, people don't really realize how important they are in this world. But I did some work in between my professional jobs and was truck driving and operating earth-moving equipment. And I worked with some real characters, and some of those characters did underground work. And it's sewer water, it's electrical, it's all kinds of things. Even the oil business is, some of it's underground, not, deep, but nevertheless, I just thought that somebody should recognize underground workers. So this little guy looks like he's coming up out of the sewer, and he's got some tools with him, and if you look real close, he's got a backpack on, and that's got a bunch of tools in it. And he's got the pick and the pipe wrench. And what really struck me when I finished him was this guy's been down working in the dirt, in the dark, and he's got a smile on his face. And that is something that, we can all learn from. We all have to get down and dirty sometimes in our jobs, but this little guy's got a smile on his face. So it's a message for us. We should, no matter when we have to do that or how we do it, we can have a smile on our face. So that's the underground worker. He got a nice prize at the state fair too in the Fine Arts Division.